Hirohiko is everything I could have ever wanted out of a rival for Chihiro. I know a lot of us still mourn Sojo and wish that he was able to stay as the great antithesis to everything that Chihiro is. But honestly, now that we've seen what Hirohiko is capable of as a character, I think he's a much better fit. Not only is he much closer in age to Chihiro, meaning Chihiro isn't clashing with a grown man almost twice his age as a quote-unquote rival, but the two characters' experience levels are almost completely identical from the beginning. Like I mentioned last chapter, it's poetic almost that while Chihiro was training his traditional swordsmanship upstairs, Hirohiko was essentially doing the same thing, albeit in his own unique fashion downstairs in the hotel. Todo specifically brings up how Hirohiko, similar to Chihiro, has been able to rely on sorcery and the supernatural to get by. But now that enchanted blades are restricted from being used across the entire country, it's forcing Chihiro and Hirohiko to improve skills they previously never would have had to. In order to complete a contract with the enchanted blade Kumeyori, Hirohiko had to sacrifice his origami sorcery that he practiced over his short lifetime to perfect, going from a top-of-the-line Ashaku member to essentially powerless, especially since Hirohiko has been neglecting his sword training. The man might even be at a worse disadvantage than Chihiro is currently, because at least Chihiro has been fighting with his sword recreationally for the last 60 or so chapters. At first, Hirohiko is more than happy to take on a bunch of NPCs and level his sword skills up that way, but without wasting any time, the general manager of the Bloodshed Hotel speaks up and decides to make an example of Hirohiko himself. Yojiro Sengoku has mentored over 50 disciples on the legendary Reigen One Sword style. Instead of making the battle a coin toss with a large variation of skill in his students, Yojiro declares he'll defeat Hirohiko himself with the 150 years of history that's been being put behind his blade. Immediately, Hirohiko's inexperience shows. Yojiro's sword is too heavy for him to properly block, and the way in which the Reigen sword style moves constantly places Hirohiko in a vulnerable state that leaves him wide open for attack. It's in this moment of danger, though, that creates an epiphany within Hirohiko. Realizing that his swordplay is truly on this low of a level, Hirohiko is forced to face the fact that if he can't keep up with the general manager, how is he ever supposed to keep up with Chihiro? Enchanted blade or not, all of the powers in the world could be awarded to Hirohiko. If he can't beat Chihiro in swordplay, he's never going to be considered in the same ring as him. This realization inspires Hirohiko to make swordsmanship his own. Ever the free spirit who prefers to learn things intuitively, or in this case, in my words, the hard way. Because needing to be on the brink of death to jolt his brain, for lack of a better phrase, just to lock the fuck in, is not always the best way to learn something. That could severely end up with you dead if you don't have this epiphany. But thankfully, Hirohiko's a main character. In a quick flash, he drops his sword and changes his wielding to a backhanded style, dodging the general manager's stab by a hair and returning to neutral ground. Todo, the Hoshaku sorcerer that teleported Hirohiko in, decides she's better off staying out of this fight, as it seems she really isn't a type of combat sorcerer. She's actively avoided both fights she's been a part of now, and even admits to being scared of someone like Yojiro, the general manager. Regardless, once she starts seeing Hirohiko sweat, she asks if he truly doesn't want any help. But Hirohiko's tone changes for some reason, from worried to confident after this clash, saying not only does he not want help, he actually thinks it's a better idea if everyone came at him all at once, including the manager. Everyone is rightfully confused, wondering who the fuck he's talking to when he was getting blitzed by Yojiro just a second earlier, but it's at that moment that one of Yojiro's arms slips clean off, revealing that, in that slight little blur of a moment, Hirohiko actually moved his blade in a way that cleaved right through Yojiro's left arm, leaving even the general manager, again 150 years of swordsmanship, unsure of how Hirohiko managed to achieve such an abnormal trajectory. Yojiro acknowledges Hirohiko out of respect and asks who he's a student of, and Hirohiko just scoffs at that idea, calling them pig-headed and saying, why does he have to be anyone's student to be worth a damn? He's a student of freedom, moving forward and carving his own path. An absolute raw panel for Hirohiko, who steals the show on this chapter without any shred of doubt. Declaring there won't be a next time, Yojiro and his disciples pounce on Hirohiko, while we cut back to Chihiro and Yori, who just woke up from her nap. The Masumi are putting the finishing touches on Iori's memory seal, leaving Chihiro and Yori alone to discuss their similarities and differences. Despite both of them being children of war, Yori has been able to live a life of comfort, where the only kinds of fights she gets into are petty ones over stealing her classmates' desserts or competing over test scores, where Chihiro has endured a life of anguish filled with blood, death, vengeance, not even a single good night of sleep. Yori is sad to think that her friends might be worried about her right now, but even more so is Yori is slowly beginning to realize that if she does accept this truth that is her life, she will never be able to return to that peaceful, quiet life again. If she's Samura's daughter, she can't live both lives. Unfortunately for her, it is a life or death ultimatum. Chihiro mentions that despite how similar their stories are, he admits Yori's life at school and not being a part of the cycle of violence is honestly pretty peaceful. He even questions his own sense of self for a moment when he talks to Yori, claiming that even though he's been convincing himself that it's better to live with the truth even if it's painful, comprehending the decision that Yori has to make, Chihiro admits that believing what he did was arrogant, because when she finally does come to the decision that she wants to forget this life and just go back to school, Chihiro not only understands but accepts her words wholeheartedly. Because, at least in his eyes, unlike Yori, Chihiro never had a choice. This life of revenge, full of constant killing, it was the only way that Chihiro was able to move forward. Chihiro can look at all this death and not have fear because it's the only way he knows. There's no other way to go. Yori, on the other hand, has two roads she can go down. She has a choice. And regardless of what decision she makes, there is no right answer, because Chihiro says they are both her truth. Whatever she decides on is her life. Not a fake life, but a real and honest one. It almost seems like there is like a hint of jealousy in Chihiro's tone, as if a part of him wishes that there was another way that he could have chosen. He's been convincing himself of all of this for so long. Was there truly never any other chance for Chihiro to go down the path of a normal high schooler? Was this life that he chose to live honestly the only way he could have gone about things? Unfortunately for Chihiro, the man never gets much time to comprehend all of these philosophical questions, because we're always moving on to the next thing. As the elevator is called up, it opens to reveal the general manager of the Bloodshed Hotel's disembodied head, carried by Hirohiko with his blade in the other. Blood falling from his face, Hirohiko smiles, telling Chihiro that he's ready for him now, implying after massacring the general manager and all of his disciples, Hirohiko's personal swordcraft has leveled up to a point he feels confident facing his rival. Meanwhile, Chihiro, who currently is running on no sleep at all, draws his blade forward. He calls upon the few hours of pure white EI style training he was able to get in during the night and tells Yori not to worry, as he promises to return her to school, no matter what. My only thing is, how do we feel about Hirohiko blitzkrieging his way through 150 years of swordsmanship history? I mean, for a general manager that ran a bloodshed hotel that supposedly kept the underworld in check, at least underneath its doors, for decades, if not centuries, that reputation went out the window pretty quickly for an 18-year-old with no sword training. But I guess Chihiro did the same for the Rakuzachi. This generation really just has to be this peak, I guess. And what are your thoughts on Yori's decision? Do you think she's right to reject her real life and choose the more peaceful one? Or do you think by the end of this arc, she'll probably end up changing her mind? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'm always interested to hear your guys' opinions. Hit that like button, and if you haven't already, check out the main channel for some extra content if you're willing to look. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, peace.